Welcome back to another episode of Loving Well Together. And we wanted to take this time to just discuss ways you can learn together through this material. So I'm tickled once again to have Milo join us, and he has some thoughts for us today.
Well, and this is based on, you and I have attended different marriage conferences, and I've done training on these kind of things. I've led trainings in a variety of environments, and one of the things I've noticed is anytime you get two people together that need to be learning with one another, you need to kind of align expectations and set some realistic kind of parameters for what that could look like in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. So what's our first thing here?
Number one, recognize you may take in information differently.
The first thing with that is usually it's not uncommon for couples to have different learning styles or to take in information differently. I think it's fair to say that when you see something, you hear something, you want to talk about it just right then and there, and discuss it and sit down and look deeply into each other's eyes. And
what do you think about that?
Yeah, and I'm not like that. I'm very much on the other, not complete opposite end of the spectrum, but I'm not there. Where I would be more like, well, let me think about it. Let me kind of sit and digest it and mull it over and see how it kind of
beat it up.
Yeah, fits with other things that I know to be true and other life stuff, so that when I speak to it, I can speak intelligently. And so I think it's important just to recognize that there's two different learning styles. It's easy initially. It's easy for you to get frustrated with me because you can see, this is my interpretation.
I perceive he doesn't care about it like I do.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily the case. As much as it is, we just have a different way of digesting the material, and so that's one of the things that I would encourage you with, particularly if you're watching these and you might be thinking, "Oh, my husband or my wife needs to see this." I know this is for PWalk, so it's probably mostly wives saying, "Oh, I want my husband to sit down and watch this." I would just be set that up for success by recognizing that you guys probably have some different approaches for how you want to digest this information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Number two, plan a time to discuss what you've learned.
Yeah, so in light of the fact that there's different styles, like Bethany we'll just use us as an example, maybe create an extreme setting. So let's say she watches one of these videos and she's like, "Hey, I sent you a link. I want you to watch it. Let's talk about it right now."
Right when you get home.
Right when you get home. And, when I get home, I just want to sit and crash on the couch and watch the news. My head might not be in that space. And so it can be perceived that she's wanting to engage, I'm wanting to disengage, when the reality is it may be that you find something that you want your husband to watch, or if you're a guy and you want your wife to watch. So set a time in which you want to discuss these things. So say, "Hey, I want you to look at this. When is the time that we could get together and actually discuss this?" So let's say you tripped on something on Tuesday or Wednesday. You say, "Hey, could we talk about this Saturday morning when the weekend gets here?" Whatever the case may be, but set a time that you're going to discuss these things. Don't think that, I know for some it's like, "Oh, if we don't discuss it now, we're going to lose the opportunity." Listen, if it's that important, it will be here tomorrow. So, and there's no piece of information that if you hear it today, if you don't act on it today, then it's going to evaporate. That's not a thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Number three, identify steps you can take.
Yeah, so I think once you sit down with one another and you're kind of discussing things, discuss beyond the novelty or the truth of the matter or any of those kind of things. Listen and learn with application in mind. So what are the things that we could do differently in our marriage? So in light of the fact that I heard this, so Bethany sees something and she, it impacts her and she wants me to watch it, and it's maybe a Tuesday. So I'll watch it, but let's talk about it Saturday morning then. Then when we get together Saturday, we're thinking with some practical steps in mind. So, okay, great, we both watched this thing, or we heard this thing, or we read this chapter in a book, or whatever the case may be. So what? That's my thing, is like always the so what. What's the steps we're going to take? What are the application steps that we can kind of take in light of the circumstances that we're in? Mm-hmm. What's the fourth thing?
Experiment with your
okay.
ideas for a limited time.
Yeah, so experiment with the ideas. Once you come up with some steps you can take, don't think that, oh, if we just do these, everything's going to be fixed or we're going to be fine. Experiment with it and give yourself a predetermined amount of time that you're going to experiment with that. So let's say there's a way that you want to be able to handle conflict, or maybe there's something you've heard in this series that you kind of want to apply into your marriage. Well, try it, experiment with it for a predetermined amount of time. So say 2 weeks, a week, 3 weeks, whatever that needs to be for you. I wouldn't go beyond 3 weeks because that leads us to the fifth thing.
Mm-hmm. Adjust your decisions based on what you learned through experience.
Yeah, so after you identify, hey, we're going to experiment with it, and 2 or 3 weeks goes by, then you come back together and you go, okay, what worked, what didn't work? What made sense, what didn't make sense? What do we need to adjust in light of our relationship and our lifestyle? Because there may be things that you see that you're learning through this little series that we're doing with one another, or in a book you read, or another conference you attended, or something along those lines. But you kind of, you wash it through the filter of someone else. It needs to be washed through the filter of your life and your responsibilities and circumstances and background and history and personalities and all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So when you experiment with it, but then you kind of get a chance to live with it and it forms to who you guys are, then adjust according to your lifestyle, tweak it based upon what your experiences are. That's what we've done. And that's what I've seen successful couples do. I think one of the things I've seen couples do is they go, well, I tried it, it didn't work for us. And it's because they kind of took something and they expected it just to kind of quickly plug into their lives, and it didn't plug in because they had to hone it and they whittle it to shape the type of relationship that they had with one another. The central truth is still truth, but it has to kind of be formed to the lifestyle and to the personalities of that specific marriage.
And the season you're in.
And the season you're in. Yeah. Because there's things you and I are doing today that are not totally different, but they're different than they were 15 years ago because we're in a different season. We have different responsibilities. Our kids are a different age. We have different life experiences since then. And so it's always stuff that you've got to be adjusting. So the things that you always kind of got to be in that experimental phase, which also gives you the opportunity to fail, to try stuff and it not work, and then discuss why it didn't work, and then try again or adjust things. So we wanted to kind of pause. I know there's questions that have come in that we've been taking, and as I was thinking about that, I think this is one of those critical points that oftentimes gets overlooked in these kind of series. Is we just kind of want to pause and recognize there's ways of digesting this type of information that can be really helpful. There's also ways of digesting this that can be hurtful, because what we don't want to do is give a couple, some information that you guys can use as ammunition against one another.
Right.
Like, here's information. If you would only do this, and if you would only do that, look, I'm going to make these changes. Why don't you make these changes? And you just don't set yourselves up for any kind of success that way. So our hope is that that doesn't happen, but instead that you take this information and you kind of figure out how you're going to learn from it, and in light of the fact that you probably got two different learning styles, you got two different ways of digesting that information, you've got two different personalities, you've got different life experiences than ours, or a book you're reading, or other resources that you're having inform your lives. But there's kind of some good practical ways, some practical steps you can take to digest that information. So that's what we wanted to cover today. I hope that was helpful. We got some other stuff that we're going to be rolling out over the next few days that we're excited to share with you.
But thanks for joining in. Feel free to leave a comment below and give us your feedback, and we look forward to coming back to another episode. Bye.